I know that people will see my face and they see my light skin, they see my blonde hair or my blue eyes, and they automatically jump to, oh, she's privileged. With that word privilege comes the implication that my life is valued more than someone else's who maybe doesn't look like me. And in 2023 in the United States, that simply isn't true. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Jackie and I help people create a life that looks good on the outside, but more importantly, feels good on the inside. There's just one question you have to ask a white person to prove that white privilege is real. You just have to ask them, what age did your parents sit you down and have the conversation with you? Or ask a white parent, at what age did you sit your child down to have the conversation with them about how to act around police so that they don't get murdered? Most of the Black people that I know had their parents sit them down, some of them as young as 3 or 4 years old, to explain to them how to behave around police so that they don't get murdered. No child should have to have their childlike innocence ripped from them as they now fear death. When it comes to the concept of privilege, yes, I'm extremely privileged to not have had that worry. Now, inviting nuance into that conversation, just because I have privilege with police, within the law enforcement, with the entire judicial system, it doesn't mean that the government values my life. The government does not value white lives. The government does not value Black lives. The government does not value American lives. If we want to inspire change, if we want to see real justice, we need to invite nuance into this conversation, because it is not all black and white. It's a very gray conversation that we need to start having. The government doesn't give a shit about us. They don't give a shit about anyone except for corporate profits, their own profits. Abbott Pharmaceuticals, who is responsible for the death of babies because they're tainted formula, the FDA knew that that formula was tainted, and the FDA did nothing about it. The FDA, a government agency, did not care about babies' lives. It wasn't Black babies' lives. It wasn't white babies' lives. It was babies' lives. And they did nothing about it. I'm not denying that racism is a problem in America. It is a very real problem. We cannot fight racism amongst each other. We can come together to fight a corrupt government where no one gets justice. I know what you're thinking right now. You're thinking, what does this white girl know about needing justice? So I want to tell a little story about my dad. My dad is a white man in America. He's 76 years old. He was a captain in the fire department of New York City, FDNY, New York's bravest. And before he was in the FDNY, he was a Navy veteran. He was in the Navy during the Vietnam War. By all definition, my dad should have some of the most privilege, because white men have more privilege than white women in America, or so the conversation goes. But the government didn't care about his life. No, the government lied. And when my dad was a first responder at 9/11 and the EPA knew that the air wasn't safe to breathe, they lied about it. What went on to happen is that my dad got multiple cancers. He's had multiple surgeries. He's had multiple ailments, all as a result of the government lying. And no one went to jail. There was no justice. And you know what happens now? The taxpayers, the average white person, the average Black person, they're paying the bill for the government lies. There are lawsuits upon lawsuits upon lawsuits, and the taxpayers are paying for the mistakes of the people who lied. No one went to jail, no one got in trouble, no one got fined. The opiate crisis is another instance where the government doesn't value white lives. It disproportionately affects upper white middle class America. Not only was it a scheme to get people addicted, to get people hooked, knowing that this was a very addictive substance, knowing that these people didn't really even need these pharmaceuticals, they still intentionally created the opiate crisis. The government sued the pharmaceutical company responsible for the opiate crisis and made billions of dollars. The government profited off of the loss of lives. The government knew that these doctors, these pharmaceutical companies were preying on these people's lives to make profits, and the government allowed it to happen. And then in turn, the government went on to profit from it. There is no justice to be had where we are right now. There's not going to be justice. There's not going to be justice for Black lives. There's not going to be justice for white lives. There's not going to be justice for brown lives, Asian lives, for any American life. There is no justice to be had within the system that we are in right now. And if we want to see justice, if we want to see change, we need to put down our differences and we need to pick up the things that we have in common. Going to circle back to the beginning about Black parents having to explain to their children how to behave around police, because their biggest fear is that they would lose their child for no reason. And when it comes to something like the opiate crisis, that's the same fear that white people have, that they might lose their child for no reason. They may stem from different places, but we have the same fears. We have the same fears as a result of a government that values profit and personal interest more than it values lives. This government does not value my life any more than a Black life. They just devalue us in different ways. Thank you so much for coming back to my channel. Again, my name is Jackie, and I help people to create a life that looks good on the outside, but more importantly, feels good on the inside. I make new videos every Monday and Friday, so don't forget to click subscribe, and I'll see you at the beginning of next week.